this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to create some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to create some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, but not just any fantasy today, because today we are going to be using our generator to create an outline for a potential fantasy book. The question that we have here today is, can we improvise a fantasy story?
Well, we've certainly tried it before. We've done 2 of these episodes already. We had the great Spiffbo finalist and friend of the show Levi Jacobs approval for at least one of those FCF Friends Creating Fantasy, that is, episodes. So maybe we're not doing too bad so far. And I think that now we have to find out, can we do it again, Charles? Can we randomly generate a bunch of fantasy nouns to create a title with, and then randomly generate a bunch of fantasy tropes and like character types or roles, I guess is the way to put it?
We're going to generate a book title, a protagonist, and an antagonist. And that is a good question. I'm not sure if we can. We're coming off
we can generate them.
We're good. We can definitely generate them, but can we string it together into a coherent plot outline, back of the book summary, if you will?
Right.
We're going to do our darndest. We're coming off of a recording marathon right now. We've never recorded this late before, so I'm feeling the creative juices. It's going to get wild out here. Who knows what's going to happen? Anything's possible on Friends Creating Fantasy. Some just very exciting off-the-cuff energy here.
Right. Well, we're letting them behind the scene. I may or may not have pushed to go to bed before doing this. And Charles may or may not have said, I think we're primed for Friends Creating Fantasy. So if I start having like those like fever dreams before you start falling asleep, and that makes the creative juices flow, who's to say we won't create some sort of awesome improvised story? So, I mean, Charles, I know you mentioned back the book. I guess we do want to go all the way from beginning to end in our summary of the story. So we're gonna try to tell a complete outline, is probably the way to put it, of a fantasy story that we created off of randomly generated nonsense.
That's right. And nonsense is the key word there. Usually like to come into episodes prepared with notes, but with Friends Creating Fantasy, we come on with nothing. So we're just talking right now with no preparation.
As is probably clear to the listener.
As is probably clear. But what we like to do with Friends Creating Fantasy, how we like to get started, is by getting a book title going. And the way we do that is we have our generator where we have a bunch of very common nouns that you will find in a fantasy book title. I'm seeing words like dagger, dragon, storm, blade, shadow. You get the idea. We have a huge list. Raven, yes, as we know from the Raven's Fantasy, which was our debut novel from Friends Creating Fantasy. So we're going to go ahead. Dylan's going to generate one of the words. I'm going to generate the other one. And we're going to see if we can't put together a coherent title. Dylan, if you do the honors and give us our first word, our first noun.
Yeah, generate yours at the same time, Charles. So
mine's generated. I have it.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. My word is tower.
Tower. Okay. My word is memory. So we have the word tower and the word memory.
Right. It gives us a few options here.
Gives us a few options.
The classic is to go the noun of nouns. So like as a Mad Lib style. So that would be the Tower of Memory
Well, we
or
could
the
do memories, Tower of
or
Memories.
is it memories
Well,
that
the
you
word is
drew,
memory that
okay.
I generated, but I think we can, to fit a
Okay.
title, we can do memories if we
Sure.
wanted to.
Yes, this is FCF, and there are barely any rules. So, the
Well said.
Tower of Memories. We could go the Memory Tower. We could go the
Hey.
Tower Memory. We can go. There's all sorts of options here, Charles. Do any of those stick out to you?
The Tower of Memories is a front runner for me. I'm wondering, like, if I want to do anything really crazy and break the formula and do, like, um, the tower in which she held her memories. But I think the Tower of Memories is fine.
Yeah, I think that anything we would gain from calling the book the Tower in which she held
Or you know what I'm
her
saying, like thinking
memories,
of a way
we
to
could do
break
with the
the
Tower of
formula.
Memories. Yeah. Why break something that may or may not be working, Charles? Let's go with the Tower of Memories.
The
I think that
tower?
gives us some interesting options. So
I
I'm with
think
you.
the Tower of Memories is kind of cool. So I think we're done with book titles. What we're going to do now is with the Tower of Memories as our. Do we want to go memory or memories? Like the Tower of All Memory or the Tower of Memories, the plural?
I think
Go for it.
I think the Tower of Memories. I have some ideas already brewing based on that, so
Okay,
let's
great.
stick
So
with
we'll
that.
keep it with that. So we're going to do now. No book is complete. No plot outline is complete without saying who is your main character. So Dylan is going to pick a character role. Some examples I see here are princess, prince, warrior, barbarian, etc., etc. And he's going to pick one of those. And then I'm going to pick the trope type. So we have a bunch like anti-hero, mentor, vengeful, wisecracking, hardened. We have a bunch of those
Right.
generated as well. And so this way we kind of put the two together to give ourselves a rounded character, hopefully.
Hopefully. Before the show, I was saying, I hope we do not get wisecracking dragon, because that's certainly
That
in
was
the
the
mix.
test one that came up. We're like, oh gosh, I don't know if we can handle that. But what are we going to get in real time?
In real time, I'm letting the generator go. Oh, Charles, you're going to think I cheated, but we got Rogue. We got Rogue.
A rogue?
Yeah.
All right. And, I think I got an appropriate trope for that because I have orphaned. The
Ooh.
orphaned rogue.
Yeah. So, like,
I think
many of the main characters we've read about that are rogue types.
Or many of the main characters in fantasy are orphaned
right.
for one reason or another.
Yeah. I mean, Quoth, you could make the case is a rogue. It's not a spoiler to describe Locke Lamora as an orphaned rogue. He's pretty much that from the start. The first scene is him being sold off to someone he's already orphaned, and spoiler, Locke Lamora is a rogue. Not like obviously a rogue.
I know that. I've never read it.
Right. So I think a Locke Lamora type is very much in the mix for this is our protag, Charles?
This is the protag.
Oh, so this anti-hero Locke Lamora type is what's on my mind, and we've got this interesting title, The Tower of Memories. So I wonder where we're going, but we need a villain if we're going to
the last
go there.
piece of the FCF puzzle is the antagonist. And we're going to do the same thing we just did for the protagonist, but designate this character is the antagonist. So let's go ahead and get that going. Dylan, what do we got?
We've got an orc, Charles.
An orc? Okay. The trope type that I have for orc is mentor.
No, Charles. Not a mentor orc. Give me the wisecracking dragon instead.
So we have the mentor orc. That is not a character I was expecting to pop up in the Tower of Memories. Not one I would have originally written to go against our orphaned rogue. But
no.
It's the magic of friends creating fantasy, I guess.
Magic is one thing to call it, Charles.
This is the pressure in which we will use to create the diamond that is the Tower of Madness.
Tower of Memories, Charles.
Memories, yes. Good, well said. The Tower of Memories.
So the question we ask is, can we improvise a fantasy story? And the answer is no. No. Okay. Well,
Is maybe. We got to get our story
maybe we
straight.
gotta see where it goes.
So to summarize, we have the Tower of Memories, protagonist, orphaned rogue, antagonist, a mentor, orc. Um, so an orc in the antagonist role, not too unusual, right?
Right. It's the mentor aspect that's a little bit less usual, both in terms of an orc being a mentor is atypical in fantasy,
Yes.
and uh, a mentor being an antagonist or a villain is also atypical, though not unheard of, I would say, in fantasy.
I would agree with that. Um, you know, it could be one of those cases where it's not revealed that the mentor role, like the idea that this mentor is the antagonist, could be like a twist, which is something that we could play up if we wanted to, or
Sure.
we could make this mentor orc an antagonist right from page one. I think both are interesting, and I just think it just goes to where you're leaning.
Well,
Because
here's what
we
I'm
just gotta address this mentor thing's thrown
right.
for.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. The first thing that comes to mind for me, Charles, is I I'm trying to base this in the some setting here, which is the Tower of Memories,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to think what kind of characters make a lot of sense in this situation. I imagine the Tower of Memories is almost something that a mentor could take a young orphaned rogue type into and kind of like travel with them through the Tower of Memories. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is a trusted mentor at first and something that is revealed to the protag as they journey through, or maybe up, like to the top of the Tower of Memories throughout this plot. Something that the mentor is showing to this person
Mm.
is like that's where the villainous stuff comes in, and it's sort of this more plot twisty. The the mentor character had been a villain all along, and we find that out journeying through. Or I really think it's up, right? Like getting
Yeah,
to the
it's a
top of the
tower
tower,
after all. Yeah,
right? Like this journey up the tower, and something that we'll learn through watching these memories,
that's
or
well
like
said.
our protag will figure out.
I really like the idea of having a journey that's up a tower. Like a lot
Right.
of times in like Lord of the Rings or something, or Wheel of Time, it's a journey across, you know, like different portions of the world, like across a map. But to have a journey that's up a tower, I think is particularly interesting. And when you have a book called The Tower of Memories, I think that's a great direction to go. I'm wondering though, because we have an orphaned rogue type. So who is a mentor to an orphan rogue? I kind of like to think that what if the orc kind of raised our protagonist,
Right.
and then when the protagonist became rogue was when he split off from our antagonist and he became a rogue after that. And maybe he was raised in the tower, and maybe he goes back to the tower to take on the
Mm.
antagonist. Like that's his tower of memories. And then you could
Oh.
have like the capital L aspect of it, of something to do with like being raised as an orphan and coming of age, and like realizing that the people that raised you aren't always, aren't great sometimes, and stuff like that. like
Ooh.
like that could be
I
interesting.
Oh, Charles, I think I love this idea actually
Great.
now. Like
Okay.
I think that here's how I'm imagining it. Yeah, this is our orphaned rogue protag was raised. It could be this kind of thieving crew thing, we're already this roguish type. So let's say there is an orc mentor in charge of this thieving crew, and the thieving crew, maybe it's a really big crew, and it's based in this tower.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine the orc mentor kind of exists at the top of the tower. And this protag is coming back after whatever experiences they've had, like
Yeah.
you were saying, and returning to their home, and just going through all these different levels of the tower. And at each level, maybe the memory, like I guess in my head it was more like a supernatural thing where like the tower would show them memories
Right.
in
It
some
could be
supernatural
both. I
way.
kind of like the
But
idea of it being both.
it could be. I guess I was thinking a little bit more of this. I know we've drawn from this friend of the show, Mark Lawrence style of like going back and forth in time, kind of through flashbacks
Mm.
and using that element to flesh out a character and their history and their relationships with people. And what if each level that our orphaned rogue protag goes up, they meet new characters from their past or like new characters to us, the readers, and we get a chapter with the characters as adults now, but we also get this like weaved in next chapter that fleshes out their background and their relationship, or
I
maybe it
love
goes
that.
vice versa. But I kind of like
I
this like
kind of like we
jumping back and
start
forth.
like it's this the book starts with this orphaned rogue returning home, but you
Yes,
know that it's kind of like he's also going to battle, kind of a vibe. It's both,
or she,
or
or they.
or they, whatever. I'm not married to any gender at this point. They get to the tower, and it's kind of like I'm coming home, but it's also got this idea of like I'm going to battle, And then we get flashbacks, and we get to learn more about some of these
Ooh,
relationships and characters that kind of recontextualizes the moments of him or her, they going up the tower. I think that's a great
I
idea.
like it.
And
I
when you
like
have
it,
a
Charles.
book
So
called The Tower of Memories, to have memories being part of the narrative device being used, I think is also
yes,
kind of a brilliant idea. So keep it in.
let's do it, Charles. I think that yeah, I think so. They came back to the tower with the goal of getting to the top and maybe killing the like orc mentor that they think has done them wrong in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the journey is kind of we meet our protagonist as this person who feels very righteous in their course of action that they're here and if I can just get to the top and finally defeat that person who led me wrong,
Right.
then like I'll have achieved vengeance and therefore victory.
Well said. I like the
But
idea. Oh, go for it. Go for it. While you're on a
well, I'm
roll.
just going to say I mean obviously there have to be some twists and turns that we learn in these memories and maybe like we'll see where we get by the end, but I kind of like the idea that maybe like the character starts off looking for that vengeance against the orc mentor and maybe it's a story about forgiveness where something we learn in these memories makes them think where maybe the orc mentor was wrong in a lot of ways but maybe the way to move past these traumatic things in the past that happened to our orphaned rogue protag already is to just accept them and move on and stop this chain of violence and vengeance and whatever else.
That's a nice hopeful message that I'm open to. For me, you can't have like this story needs betrayals and it needs twists. Like it needs all those kinds of things. And so the I guess the question is like how do we work in a betrayal, which I guess will be between our protagonist and our antagonist. Like what is bringing our protagonist back to the tower, and how can we work that in as like a betrayal, and then how can we twist that by the time we get to the top of the
Right.
tower. I think those are two really important things. The other thing is I'm hung up on the fact that this mentor character is an orc. What if we just made every character orcs and
Yep.
like and just kind of wrote that off? Like they're just all orcs. It's just what they are. And
I agree.
so
Yeah.
we don't have to worry about making that part of the narrative at all, because I don't think it's I'm more excited about the Tower of Memories than I am about necessarily the fact that there's orcs in this story.
Right. I think every character is an orc, and I don't know if that adds anything at all to this
It
story.
helps
Like maybe
us.
there's a little bit of fun to this idea that we're writing a book where the main just everyone's an orc in this
It's interesting also
world,
to
and that's kind
picture
of
orcs
like
going through like emotional
right.
development and character development and story arcs, like not things you typically give orcs. So maybe we can
Yeah.
play on the kind of trope of like the ruthlessness of like orc armies and things like that, or I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
you can build in some interesting like culture around a crew of orcs that live in a tower that's might be supernatural or not. Like, I don't know. You can make the setting interesting and the set pieces interesting with bringing in some like orc tropes, but I don't think it's super important to the
Yeah.
story that we're trying to tell.
I yeah, I kind of just like the idea that the story it makes orcs such a like unnecessary, like they didn't have to be orcs, so it's such an
Yes.
almost like tangential part to the story that in that way it almost subverts the orc trope, because it's
Yes.
like orcs are supposed to be these almost evil by nature creatures, and us just putting them in the place of a story that could easily all be humans does some sort of interesting subversion. Wouldn't be our choice probably if the random fantasy uh, trope type or whatever character role type stuff didn't give us an orc mentor. But I think there's something kind of fun in this idea of subverting the orc character by just making them indistinguishable from people besides their physical
I agree.
appearance.
I agree 100%. And that's a creative decision I think we just lock in right now. We're
Sure.
subverting the orc trope by making it totally unnecessary that they're orcs, but they are. And
Right.
there's something to be said on that. So,
Yeah.
got it. So, orcs, done. Now, I think we need a reason.
Let's talk mentors.
Yeah, let's talk why our protag is returning to the tower. Do we want to play up the orphan thing, or it's like
That's what
you
I was
killed
thinking.
my parents and I found out, and you
Mm,
tried to kill me, but I survived, so now I'm coming back and I'm getting my vengeance? Is this like a vengeance
I
thing? Revenge?
Yeah, I think it starts as a tale about vengeance
I
and
like the idea
ends
of
as a
keeping it
tale
like a
about
simple like 80s action. Like the premise is I'm just gonna get my revenge. Like I think that's cool, especially when you're just the whole plot is going up a tower. It's like
right.
I'm here to get my revenge and kill you. Like okay, that's cool. So and the guy can be super cool, almost like a Geralt type, where he's got some cool weapons and he's just like an action hero kind of guy. This
We need
rogue
a yeah,
character.
we need roguish elements though, so
Okay,
it
they can have
has
like daggers and
yeah,
like
a little bit more of that.
yeah, some little more sneaking around. Like instead of
Right.
you can like be in the shadows, but he's an or she or they are an action hero. Okay, and kind of vibes like a roguish action hero-y kind of popcorn movie kind of beginning to this character. I think would be cool. Just like fun action right off the bat.
Yeah. Yep. I like that too. I think all that we need to stick with is making sure that, they're coming in with their cloak on and they're ducking
And
around the
it's
shadows and they're
nighttime.
slipping
Yeah.
and sliding around and it's nighttime and they're throwing daggers. And as long as
Yes.
it's that way of
Yes.
doing the action sequence, which I think could be really fun,
Yes.
then I think we're all for that. I think when it comes to how do we flesh out this vengeance plot, I think all we really have to go on right now is this orphan bit. So I think at least we have to have the character, our protagonist, that is, coming in thinking that the mentor character has killed their parents or was the real reason that they
Hmm.
ended up
What
orphaned.
what if like the Tower of Memories? What if that tower contains like actual memories or something like that? And what if our protagonist is coming to learn the truth by seeing the
Mm,
memory? It's like I know you, for example, killed my parents, and I'm going to retrieve that memory and prove it and expose you or whatever, or I'm going to prove you betrayed me or whatever, and the memory's in the tower and I'm there to get it. Or what if they're like a, you know, we can add that supernatural element to make it a literal tower of memories where they can store memories for either purposes of thieving or something, or maybe as just like a library kind of thing. Like, I don't know, maybe
what
both.
if they're memory thieves, Charles? What
Memory
if the
thieves.
thing that this thieving crew steals is other people's memories?
Now you're
And
talking. That's
they
cool.
keep those memories in the tower, locked safe away behind all these, all these locks and traps and all these kind of things. And who's great for trying to get through locks and traps, though? A roguish type.
That's exactly
So
right. And
I
what's a great
think
setting for locks and traps? A tall tower.
correct, Charles.
All
So
the
I think
pieces
that
coming together.
yeah, that they are. So I think that maybe what we have here is there's some way in which our orphaned rogue protag has come to believe that if they can access enough of these memories that have been stolen, and I love this idea that they're other people's memories,
Or
then
what if
they
he's
can
going
piece
after some
together.
specific memories that he knows are there and is
Yes.
trying to heist,
Yes.
basically? You
Yep.
add some
I
heist
agree.
elements to this.
I like it.
Mhm.
So there's heist elements to stealing the memories, and these, I guess there's some fun to this, like stealing already stolen memories,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Like, we're gonna steal them again.
We're
Like,
gonna steal them back.
yes. So, but not for the sake of giving them back to the original owners, but for the sake of this orphaned rogue protag being able to use these memories to piece together how they ended up orphaned or something.
Right.
And maybe it is a twist ending then, Charles, that it turns out that the mentor who was there all along was the reason.
Right. I
You
like
know
to
what I'm
think there's
saying?
some harsh truths that our protagonist like reveals by thinking he found the memory and looks at it and he's not what he it's not what he thinks it was,
Right.
and that's kind of like a twist. Some kind of harsh truth, harsh reality situation.
Mm. Yeah. Well, are you leaning in a direction right now with, I know we bounce back and forth kind of with like, is this mentor uh, like from the start clearly the person that our protag wants to defeat? Are they sitting at the top of this tower, like, pulling all the strings or
Well, I
whatever? Or
see
are
that
they,
they are like the leader of this
yes.
memory thieving enterprise, basically, right? It's a
Hmm.
tall tower. So I kind of think of them as having this almost like executive role, like a CEO almost kind of, but still being able to battle and stuff like that. But they've got, people lower down in
Ooh.
the tower doing the battling for them.
I've
Yeah, go for it.
I've got an idea, Charles. What if the way that the mentor is an antagonist here is more that like they are in charge of this thieving enterprise, like you said, and they just don't want their memory property stolen from them.
Yeah, the twist
And
could be they're thieves, but they're actually doing a community service kind of in some way. I don't know what that would be, but it's like I'm doing this with good intentions, maybe? Like that could be the twist where it's like you don't understand the greater game being played, those
ooh,
kind of elements.
well, I don't know if this is what you were thinking about, Charles,
Hmm.
but what if we find out that the mentor character who seemed to be an antagonist, maybe it's not really a villain per se,
Right.
but they were doing that thief stealing enterprise because they think that if they steal really traumatic memories from people, then those people will be happier. And that's what the mentor is trying to do. So then the protag is maybe like was one of the victims of this memory stealing process because the mentor wanted to take away the memory of how the rogue protag got orphaned because that was such a traumatic memory. And the mentor thought that would make the rogue protag happier, but the rogue protag wants the truth and wants to be able to process these really bad memories. It's almost got this like eternal sunshine type
Yeah,
vibe
yeah,
to
yeah.
it, right?
That's really interesting. I do think we should go that direction. I've always loved fantasy stories where there's revealed to be like there's a greater game being played
Yeah.
and we're not concerned with the level in which you're playing this game, right? So I kind of like that idea of like, look, he's the leader of this thieving crew, but that's almost like a front for the greater conspiracy going on that's actually for some sort of either greater good like you're saying or something like that. I think that's the path we should be going down, certainly. And I also a bit of a tangent, I picture there's a fun fighting scene where they're just like he's in a hall with just tons of memories around. We have to decide how memories are delivered, but I kind of like the idea of them using
Right.
them as like weapons, kind of like being
Sure.
like, "Oh, here's a memory." Boom, is like popping in their heads, and it's like a
I
bad
kind of
memory
like
or a happy memory,
almost
and they're
like
just
a
throwing them
an
at each other.
orb,
Yeah, like
like an
like
orb.
crystal balls or something like
Yeah.
that, and they're like throwing them at each other as weapons because you got to fight with what's around, right? So they could be labeled. He's like, "Oh, this sounds interesting," and like throws it. Like that kind of stuff could be fun. But
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I mean like you get hit by one and then it's just like all of a sudden it's like, and I was a fisherman in this year, and I had 3 children, and I just had to catch enough fish to provide for dinner, and then it's just back to the fight because like
exactly.
you just got hit by a random memory of
Yeah,
someone else's.
exactly.
It's
Like the smell of the salty sea foam
right,
filled the air. Yeah, it's a totally different tone.
Exactly.
And then like snapping back to a fight where it's getting like pummeled in the face. Yeah, those funny
and you could
juxtaposition of moments could be fun.
right, and you could have fun with it, almost like play with the genre a little bit, where they get hit by a memory that takes them to like a Lord of the Rings equivalent high fantasy type setting, and they're like a Hobbit type briefly, or who knows,
They could be
right?
like
And
a little kid crying over a dessert or something. Like
sure,
that juxtaposition of like tough guy and kid could be funny.
yeah,
You could bounce. You could the what I like about it is that the possibilities are almost endless and it's kind of fun. I think
yeah,
it's exciting. Um, so I think we're on the same page so far, and let's see if we can kind of rehash what we've gone through so far. We have our the story opens with kind of our main character, our rogue or character standing at like the threshold of this giant tower, and he's psyching himself up for revenge on the leader of this thieving crew that steals memories and contains them in this tower, which is also their headquarters, and it's a tall spiraling tower, and he's like, I'm here to get my revenge. And then the whole story is him working his way up the tower of memories, and we're also getting these flashback moments as he encounters different challenges and characters and obstacles. We get these memory flashbacks of his that reveal more context into the relationships and dynamics that we have going on in the present day, and that gets us to we are confronted with the main antagonist, our mentor character, where a twist is revealed that there's some greater conspiracy going on, and our main character is kind of realizing this, I guess, is where we're at currently. Right?
right, yeah. I feel like our main character, I- I'm thinking at this point, rather than the vengeance bit, they come to the tower, and what they are seeking is truth. What they are seeking is
Ah,
to,
interesting.
yeah. So at the top of the tower is the mentor, but also is the first memory that the mentor ever stole, which was the memory of a young orphaned child who had such a traumatic experience that the mentor had to figure out how to steal that memory. And it set off an idea for this mentor. And obviously, as I'm hinting at, the first ever stolen memories from our orphaned rogue protag. So that's kind of like
Or
the
at least the
first
fact
dollar
that
ever.
the antagonist has stolen memories, and our protagonist just doesn't remember things, just knows that his memory was stolen, and that makes them like enraged, kind of motivated.
Right. Sure.
Not necessarily
Yes.
that it could be the
Mad and all
first
these
memory,
things.
but it could be a
They've gone.
memory that it was definitely stolen.
I think that what's happened is the protag has ventured out into the world at this
Hmm.
point and understood that other people value their memories, even the traumatic
Right.
ones, like consider that part of their life stories. And our protagonist has come back to the tower, and despite having been someone who, when they worked for the mentor, like our protag thought that this was a good idea and thought that it was something that was effective for themselves, they've realized no, like it is part of my life story to know what happened to my parents and know what that traumatic event actually entailed,
Hmm.
and that's what they're there to discover. um,
Right.
and they're pissed off at the mentor now because the mentor stole that from them.
Right. I like this theme of the value of memories, both good and bad. I think is a really great one for this book. And I'm trying to also work in a theme potentially of this kind of like I remember my childhood being bad and it's your fault kind of a thing because you.
Well,
Yeah.
Charles, try to save that for after the podcast if you're going to blame me for your bad
Oh my
childhood. All
goodness,
right.
yeah.
I know it's a late night recording, but try to stay on
But I
topic
don't
with
know. I
FCF
think
here.
that would be an interesting theme for this as well, because if this is a mentor character, we can assume that they raised this orphaned rogue in some ways, and maybe our
Yes.
protagonist can kind of resent the way in which they're raised. That's a common thing that adults have, is
Sure.
resenting their childhood, and I think by actually making memories these tangible things that can be stolen or given is an interesting dynamic to put into that relationship.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think you can further drive that point home of kind of like your past is your past and trying to get rid of it doesn't actually change the fact that it
Mm-hmm.
happened. I think that can kind of like double down on this idea of what we were talking about earlier with the protag finally gets the opportunity to get vengeance on the mentor character that they've come to
Mm-hmm.
resent, but then chooses to just let their mentor live and let them be despite the bad that the mentor has caused because that's part of
Ooh.
our
What
protag's
if we come full
story.
circle, right? The whole point is the protagonist is here to take a memory. What if he ends up giving memories to the antagonist? And these are memories of our protagonist, like suffering or moments of, tragedy or things like that as a result of the mistreatment by the mentor character. So it's like I came here to steal my memories back, but I'm teaching you a lesson by sharing like you didn't never realize my perspective. Here's my memories of what happened, So you have these two truths of like, oh, you think your childhood was bad, but I was doing what was best for you. It's like, oh yeah, well here's my memories of all the bad things, and they're like trying to understand each other in that way,
Well, yeah. Well, I like that, Charles. I like the idea that it's not just the protag sharing their memories as like a vengeance against the antag, but also the antag trying to be able to show their memories to the protag to basically say like, "Hey, I was trying my
Yeah.
best," and I think that could be a really interesting moment at the end of this
I
thing.
think so
And
too. I could
yeah,
go to a
what we
very
do is come,
real, open
yeah,
place, which I think would make for a very compelling finale to this book.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
I do like where that's going. I think we have a we have a interesting beginning. We have an interesting
Mm-hmm.
ending. We have a little bit of hand waving of how we get there. I think with all the interactions that would have to take place in between at this moment. We don't have a lot of like act two going on. I guess
Right.
like if
Right.
there's three acts,
Well, I think
right?
that's where a lot of the fun is. We're working our way up the tower. I also kind of like this idea of the protagonist, like this idea of like if our memories define who we are, and but you don't have those memories. I like to think there's this piece of the protagonist's identity that he can't deny, but he doesn't have any memories, so that's kind of like makes a bit of an identity crisis almost, if that makes sense, where it's almost like a not necessarily nature nurture thing, but it's like there's some things about yourself that just because you don't remember them doesn't mean they didn't affect you, kind of a thing, if that makes sense. So this kind of can fuel his or her their. I just picture a man for whatever reason, um, his quest for
Yeah, I
revenge.
would guess the orc stuff might be doing some of that to you. I don't think there's been a lot of female orc characters in fantasy, to my knowledge, but I could be
Yeah,
wrong about that.
yeah, it's not as explored.
Or non-binary orc characters. It's hard to know, but either way, I think yeah, the assumption is that our characters, unless we say otherwise explicitly, are don't have a gender yet in our outline.
It's not something that's super critical to figure out right now. We haven't made that part
Right.
of their. It could be interesting if we want to do this, child parent relationship to know the genders. Like you can add a little more texture to those memories that get shared back and forth, but I don't think we need to necessarily pin that down on the air here. Um, Man, I really like that ending. I really like the premise. I think as we get there, it can be like we can go to different floors. We can, create. It gives you the opportunity to write as many characters as you want and go back in
Right.
time and contextualize those relationships. Maybe the protagonist, has someone on the inside, like every good heist movie has. You can kind of pull on some of those heist things. Maybe there's another person that comes with them that can go in the
Ooh,
tower as
Charles.
well. Like there's endless potential that I think you just got to leave open. Like get people excited about it. Flesh those ideas out
Well,
later.
yeah, here's where I'm thinking
Mm.
now. Maybe there's a bunch of members of this thieving crew that have sort of turned in the same way that our rogue protag has turned, and our rogue protag is kind of the leader of this thieving crew, but it has those heist feeling elements to it where they're getting everyone together and they each have their own special skills. And maybe on each floor, Charles, one of the heist members gets their memory back.
Mm.
Uh, and it's kind of like the person who was most critical to getting that memory back, like we needed their skill set to solve this particular floor, then that
Oh,
person ends up
interesting.
getting their memory back on that floor. You get what I'm saying? So we
Interesting.
give each of these characters, maybe there's a crew of 7 and there's 7 floors, and they each kind of get their moment to shine, but the final floor and the top floor where we meet our mentor again is our pro tags floor, and maybe we like leave someone behind
That's
each floor
interesting. You
too.
can
So
get
we
very sci-fi about it, where it's like, what if you took someone's body, took all their memories out, and put all of someone else's memories in? Like that could be like a really interesting, like if you needed grunts or something. But I'm just thinking of all the premises you can create, where
Sure.
it's
There's a lot you can
yeah.
explore here, Charles, for sure. I think if we're looking to flesh out the middle, this gives us some sort of like what's happening in the middle. Each of these different crew members and whoever they are would have to get fleshed out by anyone who feels like taking this the next step to try to write it or whatever. But I think, what do you think of that idea? Like
uh,
7 crew members, 7 floors,
I
each
don't
person
know.
gets a
I'm on
different
the
memory, and
fence
that
with the
helps.
crew. I could be open to it, but for me, this is such a personal thing. But maybe there could be like a greater reason to go, and then it becomes personal, and it's clear
Well,
that there
here's
is a
what I
personal
think. They're
motive.
all they were all mentored by the same person, Charles. They were all part of this crew and they're kind of this found family vibe.
Hmm.
And something about each of their memories helps flesh something out for our protagonist as well.
Certainly, and I like the idea of like maybe we can do different floors as different chapters or different rooms or something. But
Right.
I like the idea of different floors being different settings, meaning different things for different people, right? And to like the anticipation of working your way to the top, I think is very interesting, and it's an opportunity to weave in tons of characters. I'm open to having a crew, and
Right.
I'm open to having like a antagonist crew as well. I forget the name. There's like a Bruce Lee karate movie where he fights one person on each floor and they get progressively stronger till he gets to like the bad guy at the end. Oh man, it's like the Tower of the Dragon or something like that, or like something like that. I don't know it, but that was always a really fun premise to me as well. Where it's like each floor, it's getting the stakes are getting higher and the enemies
Yeah.
are building up, and
And we leave someone behind, kind of like there's a bit of that in one of the maybe the first Harry Potter. I don't want to spoil things, but come on, first Harry Potter movie. I think there's this kind of like leaving someone behind at each stage that
oh yeah,
happens at
yeah,
one
yeah. I know
point,
what you're
right?
talking about,
So I'm
right?
picturing it kind of like that, and eventually we're left with just our protag,
You have to
the
have some people to
right,
kill off, right?
and they could get killed off, but I don't think it's even about. I think that what it is, Charles, is somehow our protag has to go from this point of like I want vengeance and whatever, and by the end, what they want is forgiveness and for their history to be understood not just by themselves but by the person who they think caused them pain and the
What do you
mentor,
think of
and
just
they
like
want
the
to
protag? It just comes down to the protagonist at the top of the tower, right? He makes his way to
right.
the threshold. All you see is the silhouette with the blade out, shining in the moonlight, and he goes, "Remember me."
Sure, Charles. If you need that moment, you can have it. I'm here trying to flesh out like big picture themes, and you're
We're
out
gonna
there
sell
like,
these
what if
books
there
on
was a
the.
moment with a silhouette?
We're selling these books on the moments, man. The premises. We can flesh those things out, but we need the moments, the payoffs, the twists, the betrayals, the loves.
But silhouettes are
I'm
okay.
just telling
Well,
a joke, really. But
yeah.
because
Well,
remember me,
yeah.
the
Stick with
Tower of Memories.
yes.
It's a
Very good,
joke.
Charles. I'm not. You'll have to explain that to me off the air, but I'm what I'm trying to do here, Charles, is give us the opportunity to figure out how does our protagonist move from where they are at the start to where they are at the end. And I think that having people very close to them and people who are also very close to the mentor as well gives like having those people get their memories back and potentially share their memories with our protag in some way gives the protag the opportunity to learn all sorts of lessons vicariously, quite literally vicariously, through these people and their experiences. If the protag can experience their memories, and if you want a way to make it personal for the protag can literally experience the memories of those close to them in a way that teaches them lessons until they finally learned enough to confront the antag and like accept the bad things that happened to them, much like one must accept the bad memories that happened to them,
Hmm.
uh, and then just say, "I forgive you, mentor. It is. I understand you now. You understand me, and you hurt me, and I still forgive
Right.
you." That's where I want us to
I
get,
think
Charles.
that's great, and these ideas are coming back to like, well, there's different truths to the same situation of what happened, right? And sharing each other's experiences literally by putting memories in each other's heads, I think is a great way
Right.
to do that. And I really like the premise of the whole objective is to steal memories, and then in the end he ends up giving memories as well. I think is really nice
Sure.
too. So yeah,
Right.
I think we're there. Honestly, I think we've got enough for a back of a book blurb.
Well, you keep saying back of the book. You don't tell the ending in the back of the book, Charles.
Oh, we got the elevator pitch.
Well, yeah, we've got an outline. Is I think what we have is a pretty brief outline of a story we can tell, sort of like
There's lots of potential to get
from
really
a
creative
beginning, a
here.
middle,
You
and
can
end.
build the
Oh,
whole
for sure.
world, the whole setting of the towers, the whole magic system of the memories, like the whole culture of the world, and you can.
Right.
It's there's so much we haven't fleshed out, but the outline of the story and where we want it to go and what it's
The
essentially
bare
about,
bones
the
is there,
bare
I think.
bones is there, and I think it's got good bones.
Yeah. No, I th- I appreciated fleshing this out with you, Charles. I think
Yeah,
you
I think we did it
you had
again.
some. Yeah, I think you brought a lot of great ideas to the table. I
Likewise,
hope I brought a few myself, and
definitely.
I think that yeah. Do we want to do our popcorn? Where have we landed at the end?
I think so. I'll kick it off and popcorn it to you. So we have the Tower of Memories. This is starring the orphaned rogue returning to the place in which he was raised by the leader of a memory thieving crew, and he returns to their home slash giant tower warehouse of all the memories they've stolen and cataloged, with the objective of making their way to the top of the tower to learn the truth about their childhood, their families, their parents. And he's brought with him a small little thieving crew, all out to get revenge against the mentor orc character antagonist.
Right. Well, they're yeah, well, they're all orcs, as as happens all the time in stories, and what ends up happening is so they have to ascend to the top of this tower to reach the mentor and to reach the protagonist's stolen memory of how the protagonist got orphaned. And at each stage of the tower, there is some sort of unique challenge that one of the thieving crew members is particularly suited to solve. And at that stage, the character that was particularly suited to solving the challenges gets to receive uh, one of their memories of some sort of like past traumatic incident that the mentor character thought stealing from them would make their life better. We, through the eyes of the protagonist, are able to vicariously experience the memory of each thieving crew member. And each one of these teaches our protagonist at least part of an important lesson that they will have to come to learn by the time that they reach the top of the tower, because their mind is going to change in what they're actually looking for when they reach the mentor, right, Charles?
That's exactly right, Dylan. They make their way. Eventually, it comes down to the final moments. We have our orphan rogue character at the top of the tower
Mm-hmm.
facing off with our mentor antagonist
Right.
character.
One on one at this point,
Mano y
right?
mano. They are at this difference of ideas, and it comes down to these themes around truth and about kind of this idea of, um, you know, I want to say we've got this idea of like, oh, my childhood was bad and it was your fault versus I was doing the best I can. You know, you have this parent child
Right.
dynamic, and they're really trying to make themselves understood, right? And this is when our protagonist character gets the coveted memories that he was fighting for this whole time. And then he also, in this twist moment, instead of getting his revenge, he finds a way to give his memories to the antagonist character. And it's in that way that he gets his revenge, by showing the antagonist his truth of what happened in this situation and making this antagonist character potentially see another perspective. And they kind of have this moment where they are being open and honest with each other and sharing things with each other. It gets very kind of gets really emotional in these moments, and that's how our protagonist character kind of, that's kind of the end of his arc, is the act of sharing his memories with someone that he came to seek vengeance on, you know, just
Right.
reaching this level of
And
understanding versus violence.
yes, and Charles, in the end of the Tower of Memories, our protagonist will learn to forgive, but they will never forget.
Oh, oh no, you didn't.
Yeah,
Beautiful, Dylan. I
you're
love
you're
that.
welcome, world.
that's
That's the pitch, right?
that's going in the back of the book.
All
We
right.
did it,
Well,
guys.
Charles, you want something I'll never forget? I love doing these at the end. I'll never forget creating this wonderful fantasy story with my lifelong friend. What a journey it has been. I think we've done it again. I think we improvised a story.
You know, this is the third time
And
we've done
Charles,
this. I always start these like, this isn't gonna work. It's gonna be not good. We're gonna get some bad matchup. But it always ends in an area where I'm like, you know what? That's not so bad. That's actually good. So, and
right.
I
What was the famous Charles quote on the
more
cover of our
coherent than
first
I
one, The Ravens?
expected, I believe.
Right.
And that
I think
continues to reign true for these.
yes, that is our bar. It
Yeah.
is not necessarily coherent, but more coherent than Charles expected.
We've
And I like to think
certainly done
we
that
hit
today.
that again. And Charles, you will create an amazing book cover
Yes.
for the Tower of Memories, I
Oh, I
assume.
already have some ideas in my brain already for this one. I'm
Well,
thinking
let's hope no one steals those memories from.
very, yeah, let's hope. I'm thinking very generic stock photo of a castle. Kind of,
Not a tower.
well, it's a towery looking castle, you know. It's got like a
Okay,
huge tower part to it, and it's going to be
gotcha.
just kind of blended into dark background and then just find some cool looking text. That's all you need. So you guys can look forward to that. There's always these are always a fun creative process that keeps things interesting. And if you made it to the end, if you stuck through, well, that's pretty much all we could hope for. We greatly appreciate it, and it's super cool that you listened to the end. And I think the only way that this could ever become anything that would be more coherent than I would have expected is because of the valuable input of my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
All right, back at you, Charles. I think we hit that bar more coherent than I expected as well. So I think I'm ready for that sweet, sweet outro music if you are.
Oh, I'm ready. Thank you, everybody, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you want to see that book cover, well, you should head on over to social media, particularly on Twitter at the FTF podcast with a number 1 at the end. We'll also post it on Facebook and Instagram at the FTF podcast. You can also send us an email if you ever wanted to chat, book ideas, or anything else fantasy related. Shoot us an email at the FTF podcast at gmail.com. Dylan, if they're listening to the show, they want to support it, they happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just scroll down on that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, we would love it if you clicked 5 of those stars. Ideally, if you do have a little bit of extra time, then we always appreciate it when folks leave us a review. It's super helpful for us, but just listening to us try to improvise a fantasy story and making it to this point where I'm asking for these things, that's more than enough. We appreciate every listen, and we appreciate you, listener.
Yes, listeners, thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this wild and crazy episode. We love you, thank you, and as always, go forth and conquer, friends.